They handed my brother $12 million and told me, go earn your own. I hadn't been back in 11 years. Not for holidays, not for birthdays, not even when the Carter Foundation broke ground on a hospital wing using a name I no longer spoke aloud. But this summons for the reading of my grandfather's will somehow pulled me across state lines and across a past I thought I'd sealed shut. Maybe I was never meant to stay gone. Maybe this day had been waiting for me since the moment I walked away. The law office was colder than I expected. Not by temperature, but by design, too pristine, too orderly, too self-important. Mahogany paneled walls, oil paintings of long-forgotten judges staring down like they knew every secret we wished buried. Everything smelled like money and formality, but nothing smelled like home. Harold, the family attorney, stood as I entered his tailored suit, still the same shade of judgment he'd worn when I was 21, and walked out of this family. Emily, he greeted neutral as ever. I nodded, lips tight. Harold. The others didn't bother with civility. Ryan was lounging in the largest leather chair like he owned the place, which, depending on how this went, he just might. He gave me a slow smile, the kind that always seemed to curl at the edges with contempt. Didn't expect you'd show, he drawled. I wasn't sure either, I said, taking the empty chair across from him. My parents didn't look up. My mother's fingers fidgeted with her pearl bracelet. My father stared through the window like this was all a mild inconvenience. The rest, uncles, cousins, aunts, twice removed, sat perched like birds sensing a storm, watching with eyes too eager. Harold cleared his throat. Let's begin. The words of the will blurred into one another, legal jargon, allocations, property divisions. I sat still as names were called, as funds were parceled out like favors, as land and art and legacies were stamped with Ryan's name. To my grandson, Ryan Carter, I leave the Carter estate, the Westridge Vineyard, and a trust in the amount of $12 million. Ryan looked over at me just then, smiling like he'd scored a touchdown in a game I hadn't been invited to play. And to my granddaughter, Emily Carter. Harold continued, eyes flicking to me for a half-beat too long. I leave nothing. She's capable enough to earn her own. The silence that followed was louder than the reading itself. I could feel every pair of eyes turn toward me, waiting for the gasp, the tears, the dramatic exit. I imagined them cataloging my reaction like they were watching some off-Broadway tragedy they'd already seen in previews. But I didn't give them the performance they wanted. Understood, I said, standing. Thank you, Harold. The words were crisp, clean. I wasn't sure where they came from, but they rang through the mahogany chamber like a bell. Even Harold blinked. Ryan opened his mouth to say something, some dig, some triumphant jab, but I didn't wait to hear it. My heels clicked against the marble as I walked out, back straight, throat burning, heart strangely quiet. Outside, the October air hit like glass, clear and cold. I sucked in a breath, trying to decide what hurt more, the words or the way no one thought I deserved better. Ms. Carter. The voice came from beside the doorway. I turned, startled, to see a woman in a gray coat, scarf tucked neatly under her chin. She looked familiar, but I couldn't place her until she stepped closer and held something out. A note. Folded in thirds, my name, written in narrow, careful script. He didn't want this, she said softly. Call me. I stared down at the paper, then back at her. Who are you? Nora Gaines, she replied. I worked for your grandfather. And just like that, everything I thought I knew about this day cracked open, just a hairline fracture, but enough to let in light. The dead can't speak, but they can leave secrets behind. The trees behind the estate hadn't changed much in 11 years. Still crooked at odd angles, still damp with the scent of moss and decay. I walked slowly, feet crunching over fallen leaves, letting the twilight wrap around me. The wind whispered through the branches like it remembered me, like it still had something to say. I used to come here when I couldn't take the house anymore. When my parents' words got too sharp, or when Ryan's victories piled too high. My hideout was a small hollow between two boulders just past the ravine where the land dipped. It had been mine, untouched, sacred. And now, after what I'd just witnessed at that will reading, it felt like the only place that hadn't turned against me. But I didn't stay long. By the time darkness swallowed the woods, I was back in town alone in a booth at Melody's Diner Hands, wrapped around a cup of black coffee I hadn't touched. At exactly 8, the bell above the door jingled and Nora Gaines stepped inside. She was slimmer than I remembered, her gray coat still impeccable, her steps careful. She scanned the room, saw me, and came over. "You came," I said quietly. She sat without smiling. "I don't have much time." Neither did I, apparently, especially not if I'd truly been cut out of the will on purpose. Nora hesitated, then pulled a phone from her coat pocket. "Your grandfather added an amendment to his will, 2 months before he passed." I blinked. "Excuse me." He called me into his study, had Harold draft the changes. He wanted to include you specifically. "Not out of pity," she added quickly. "He said he'd wronged you, that he'd believed lies for too long." I stared at her. "Then where is it?" She looked down. "Gone." I leaned forward, the Formica table pressing into my ribs. "What do you mean gone?" "I mean it's missing. The amendment. It never made it into the final documents Harold read today." My mind raced. "So it was intercepted." "That's my suspicion." She finally looked me in the eye. "Ryan was here a lot during those last weeks. Too much. Always checking in. He had access. He charmed the staff. And Harold didn't exactly seem surprised when the amendment wasn't mentioned." I swallowed hard. "You think Harold's involved?" "I think Harold was pressured. Or bribed. Or both." Silence stretched between us, taut and crackling. Then she tapped her phone, brought up a voice memo. This is from 3 weeks before he died," she whispered. She hit play. My grandfather's voice, aged, scratchy, deliberate, filled the space between us. "If you're hearing this, Nora, I need you to follow through. It's time I rectified an old injustice. Emily was never the problem. She just saw too much. And I let others convince me to close my eyes. That ends now. Make sure the amendment stands." Make sure she knows I believed her. The recording ended. I stared at the phone like it might explode. I wasn't forgotten. I was erased. Every breath I took after that felt heavier. Not just because I'd been cut out, but because I'd been deliberately removed, edited from a truth someone wanted buried. Ryan. All these years I thought he'd just been the golden child, the one who did everything right while I rebelled and walked away. But now, maybe I hadn't been the rebel. Maybe I'd been the threat. "What happens now?" I asked. Nora's eyes flicked toward the window. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "The original document still exists. But getting it, that's the dangerous part." I wasn't ready for war, but I've survived worse. The estate looked exactly as I remembered it. Crisp hedges, an immaculate stone driveway, and windows that reflected the morning sun like they had something to hide. I hadn't planned on staying here again, not after what happened at the will reading. But plans didn't matter now. Not when I had proof, or at least a path to it. I told myself I was coming back to keep things civil. That's how I phrased it when I texted Ryan. "Let's not make this worse than it has to be." "Breakfast." He replied in seconds. "Sure, eggs and ashes, sis." It was barely 7:15 when I pushed open the kitchen door. The scent of bacon and fresh brewed coffee hit me like a wave of nostalgia laced with resentment. Everything was perfectly laid out: china plates, silver utensils, warm croissants in a linen basket. Our mother was already seated, reading the business section of the newspaper like it contained commandments. Ryan sat across from her robe, loose, grinning like a cat, with feathers in its teeth. "Well, well," he said, gesturing to the empty seat beside him. Look who decided to join the living. I didn't answer. I slid into the chair, poured myself coffee, and pretended to admire the garden through the window. Our mother didn't look up. Glad you're staying? It's what your grandfather would have wanted. Her tone was so smooth it felt pre-scripted. Ryan chuckled. Yes, dear Emily. Family unity. He tapped his spoon against his cup. Of course some of us just earned our place. I sipped slowly. 12 million worth. His grin widened. You can't put a price on love. The staff drifted in and out, placing dishes, refilling carafes, always quiet, always watching. In this house, silence wasn't absence. It was allegiance. I took a bite of toast. Harold seemed nervous yesterday. Ryan shrugged. He's old. Maybe he finally realized how dull probate law is. He skipped a section, didn't he? He didn't answer. I leaned in slightly. Funny thing, someone told me Grandpa made an amendment 2 months before he passed. That got him. A flicker, a barely perceptible pause as he folded his napkin. Then he leaned back, smiling lazily. Amendment. You really think you were back in the running? Come on, Em. You ghosted for a decade. Grandpa couldn't even remember your birthday. He remembered enough to leave a memo. His voice, his words. That did it. He set his coffee down with more force than necessary. You're fishing. You always were. You get a hint of drama and think it's a murder plot. Maybe it is. He stared at me jaw tight. Then, with a smile colder than the porcelain plate in front of him, he leaned in. Don't dig into graves, Em. Some things are better buried. It wasn't a threat. Not exactly. It was a reminder of who owned the shovels in this family. We finished in silence. Our mother excused herself with a peck on Ryan's cheek and a barely audible, "Try not to provoke her." I waited until the kitchen cleared, then made my move. Grandpa's study was still locked. I knew where he kept the spare key behind the antique globe in the den tucked under its hollowed brass base. Muscle memory guided me. Inside the study felt like a mausoleum, dusty, air-polished bookshelves, everything frozen in curated perfection. I didn't know what I was looking for exactly. Just anything? I rifled through desk drawers, flipped open ledgers, scanned shelves of tax records and journals. Nothing. Then, almost by instinct, I slid my hand under the desk's main drawer. The smooth underside ended in a shallow indentation just wide enough to catch the edge of a small sticky note. Yellow. Faded ink. I peeled it off carefully. 3 words. Ask Micah. You don't fire someone like Micah unless he knows too much. The rain hadn't let up since mid-afternoon. By the time I turned off the gravel road toward Micah Whitman's property, the sky had fallen into a relentless rhythm, steady, cold, and absolute. His house sat at the edge of a wooded patch, modest and worn, like someone had once tried to make it beautiful, but gave up halfway. I parked on the shoulder boots, crunching over wet gravel as I approached the porch. One of the boards creaked under my weight. Through the screen door, I saw a flicker of movement, then nothing. I knocked. No answer. I knocked again. This time louder. Finally, the door opened an inch, and a face peeked out, older than I remembered, lined with distrust. Micah, I said. It's Emily Carter. He looked at me like I was a ghost from a war he'd lost. Then wordlessly, he opened the door and stepped aside. Inside smelled of lemon oil and disuse. Books lined every surface, folders stacked like barricades. The lights were dim, the windows half covered with blackout curtains. I figured you'd come eventually, he muttered. After that note. You knew he left it, I told him not to. Said it'd only drag you into the mess. I looked around. It's already dragged me. Micah didn't offer coffee. Or pleasantries. He just sat down at a cluttered desk and stared at me. You still working? I asked. He snorted. After your brother blacklisted me? No, I rebuild vintage radios now. It pays about as well as betrayal. I stayed standing. I need to know what you know. About the amendment, about the LLCs. His jaw clenched. You know he made me sign an NDA. You also know it won't hold if he's hiding fraud. Micah's laugh was dry. Honey fraud is the family crest. But you're not wrong. A door creaked down the hall. A woman appeared, mid-50s, gray streaks in her braid. She glanced between us, her expression unreadable. Micah, she said gently, don't. He didn't look at her. Go back to bed, Irene. She hesitated, then looked at me. Let the past stay buried. I can't, I replied. She sighed and left. Micah pulled open a drawer, rummaged until he found a weathered antique ledger. It looked like it belonged in a museum. He opened it halfway, then tapped a spot where the pages had been cut hollow. Inside a small scuffed USB drive. Backups, he said, of files I wasn't supposed to keep. You remember the Carter Development Group vaguely. Your share of the estate was tied to a complex ownership clause, through an LLC your grandfather set up in your name. The amendment to the will made that public. Ryan didn't like that. My blood chilled. So he erased it. He had me rearrange the filings, redirected assets, hid your equity inside ghost accounts, legal sleight of hand. I tried to push back. What happened? I was fired. Quietly. 2 weeks later, my professional license was under review. Ryan didn't just get me out, he salted the earth. I took the drive. Is this admissible? Not directly. Copies. No notarized trail. But useful? Yes. Especially when paired with a motive. He reached for a faded folder and slid it toward me. Inside, on top of old memos and spreadsheet snapshots, was a single PDF printout. A scanned document drafted on Carter and Hale letterhead. Dated. Time-stamped. Signed. My breath caught. My grandfather's signature in thick blue ink. A full-page addendum detailing specific asset transfers. My name mentioned 5 times. But there was no court stamp. No official filing. Just forgotten. Micah's voice broke the silence. He tried to fix it before he died, Emily. He really did. I closed the folder carefully, heart pounding against ribs like fists on a locked door. The truth had fingerprints. All I had to do was follow them. I sat across from Tara Lynn in her glass-walled office on the 6th floor of a boutique law firm off Market Street. Outside Charlottesville bustled with early lunch traffic, unaware that inside this room, I was trying to exhume a legacy someone had buried alive. Tara adjusted her glasses, flipping through the printed copy of the scanned amendment. She was sharp top of her class, fresh enough to still believe in justice, but seasoned enough to recognize a war when she saw one. You're right, she said finally. This is legitimate, but not legally binding yet, because it wasn't filed. She nodded. Probate court only recognizes executed witness documents that are either submitted by the estate attorney or verified through official registries. This, she tapped the page, as a ghost. But a compelling one. I need it to come back to life. That's going to require more than this. Witness statements, filing records, anything that ties this to formal intent. I exhaled. Then we start there. Tara studied me. You know this won't be clean. Neither was erasing me. She smiled faintly. Fair. We parted with a loose agreement she'd run preliminary checks on Harold Ford's firm dig into case records, while I headed downtown to the public records office. The building smelled like mildew and bureaucracy. I scanned the digital logs of filings made over the past year, keywords Carter Estate Amendment. Nothing. But I did notice a pattern: several record requests submitted weeks before my grandfather died by Ryan's business proxy. A subtle paper trail that didn't make sense unless someone was scouting the battlefield before the war began. I left with printouts stuffed into my folder, heart heavy with the weight of half-found answers. Outside, the clouds threatened rain again. I wasn't ready to go back to the estate just yet, so I walked aimlessly down Main Street, ending up outside a cafe, where a familiar voice called my name. Amber. Ryan's fiancée sat at a patio table nursing a half-empty iced latte like it was sedative. Her eyes flicked up to mine wide and anxious. "Sit," she said. "Please." I hesitated but complied. "I don't know what you're doing," she started, "but it's making him nervous." "Good." She smiled faintly. "He told me not to trust you. Said you'd spin things." I met her gaze. "Do I look like I'm spinning? No. You look like someone who knows more than they should." I took a sip of my own drink, the bitter roast, grounding me. "And you? What do you know?" She glanced around, then leaned in. "Nothing concrete, just little things. He talks in riddles when he thinks I'm not listening. Locked drawers, deleted calls. I'm not stupid, Emily." "No, you're not." She slid her hand into her bag and pulled out a small manila envelope. "I found this last week. In the drawer he thought I didn't know about. I wasn't supposed to, but I think he's lying to me." Her fingers trembled slightly as she passed it to me. I opened it slowly, afraid of what I might find. Inside was a single sheet notarized and dated 2 months before my grandfather's death. The text was simple. "I, Harold Ford, certify having witnessed the updated will. Some people kill the truth with silence. I plan to make it scream." It was nearly 9 p.m. But Tara's office still glowed with the golden hush of after-hours intensity. The firm had emptied out hours ago, yet the air felt charged, like we were the only people awake in a sleeping city conspiring to resurrect something deliberately buried. Tara sat across from me, the declaration from Harold laid out on her desk like a sacred text. Her annotated legal pad was already half filled with arrows, references, and highlighted statutes. But what we didn't have, what we still needed, was a pattern. Suppression. Motive. Enough pieces to make the picture undeniable. She traced a line with her pen. "We have the scanned amendment, Micah's ledger, Harold's notarized statement. Still circumstantial. Unless I said we can prove he was forced to stay silent, then we'll need timelines, gaps, inconsistencies. I can get those." Tara leaned back, arms crossed. "This won't be a quiet fight, Emily." I looked out the window. The streetlights cast long shadows across the floor. "It hasn't been quiet for a long time. I just stopped pretending not to hear it." She nodded once, then handed me a yellow legal folder. "Start mapping. Dates, events, signatures. Anything you remember. We'll cross-check with filings." As I began sketching out the history of erasure, my phone buzzed. Nora. I stepped into the hallway to take the call. "Did he move fast?" she asked. "Faster than I expected. He knew I had the statement. I warned you." "You did." There was a pause. "Be careful," she added, voice low. "He's not just protecting money. He's protecting a narrative." I hung up and stood there for a moment in the dim hallway, letting the silence settle before something deeper stirred beneath it, a memory. Of an afternoon, 11 years ago. The last real conversation I had with my grandfather. It came back all at once. The sun slanting through the greenhouse glass. The old cane he tapped against the tiles when he got impatient. Me standing there angry and 20, thinking I knew the shape of legacy. "I don't want anything from you," I'd said. I know he'd replied, almost sadly. "That's why you're the only one I trust." He'd pressed something into my palm, then a sealed envelope. I never opened it. I drove home like a woman possessed past midnight, now the road's empty except for my determination. In my storage unit, an unlabeled banker's box buried beneath books and photographs, I found it. The seal unbroken. The handwriting unmistakably his. Back at my apartment, I sat in the half-light and opened it with trembling fingers. The letter was handwritten, every stroke careful and deliberate. "Emily, if you are reading this, then I am gone and something has gone wrong. You were always the one who saw truth over inheritance. I watched you walk away from comfort, from lies, from easy power. I did not agree with all your choices, but I respected them more than I ever said. When the time comes, if it comes, speak for me. Not with vengeance, but with clarity. The world is noisy. Truth whispers. I know you'll hear it. I didn't cry. I couldn't. It was too clean a pain, too sharp to bleed. I folded the letter gently, placing it back into the envelope. By the time I returned to Tara's office, the walls felt smaller. The war had begun to breathe. I handed her the letter. Add this to the file. She read it silently, then looked at me with something deeper than admiration. Conviction. We were building something real. Then the knock came. Sharp, hurried. Tara's paralegal wide-eyed, clutching a thick envelope. They just served us, she said breathlessly. Ryan's lawyers filed a restraining order against you. Restraining orders don't scare me. Being erased does. The courthouse downtown stood like a forgotten fortress in the morning fog, cold concrete, slick with dew, and ringed in gray steel. Tara and I walked through the metal detectors without a word. I could feel eyes turning toward me, some curious, some smug. Ryan was already there, standing beside his attorney like a man ready to accept an award. Perfectly pressed suit, disarming smile, and that same smug gleam in his eyes, the one he used to wear when he won board games by cheating and dared me to prove it. The hearing was small, procedural. Judge Morton presided, neutral, no-nonsense, and known for cutting through theatrics like a surgeon with deadlines. Ryan's lawyer launched first. Your Honor, our client. Mr. Carter seeks protection from persistent harassment. The respondent, his estranged sister, has begun contacting family associates, making unsubstantiated claims, and attempting to access confidential records without legal basis. We're concerned for Mr. Carter's privacy and emotional well-being. I kept my expression neutral even as the word estranged hung in the air like a stain. Tara didn't flinch. Your Honor, she said calmly, rising. Ms. Carter has not made threats, nor committed any unlawful act. In fact, she's in possession of a notarized legal document executed by the family's own attorney, supporting her claim that the current will may not reflect the decedent's final intentions. She slid a copy of Harold's statement onto the bench. Judge Morton picked it up. His eyes narrowed just slightly as he scanned the signature. That's quite a claim, he murmured. It's also quite real, Tara replied. Ryan shifted in his seat. Just for a second. Just enough. The judge exhaled. I'm not issuing a permanent injunction today, he said, and the emergency ban is lifted pending further review. But I suggest both parties conduct themselves with restraint moving forward. Do I make myself clear? Crystal Tara said. Ryan's smile faltered as we exited the courtroom. He didn't look at me. For once, I didn't need him to. Later that evening, I found myself in a dim bar 3 blocks from the courthouse. I didn't intend to go in, but the rain started and the windows glowed gold. I stepped inside, and there she was, Amber, alone. Halfway through a glass of red wine, the lipstick on the rim faded like a confession. She looked up as I approached. Her eyes were tired. She didn't flinch. You won, she said. It wasn't a contest. She huffed a breath. He thinks it is. I sat down without asking. For a moment we said nothing. The quiet between us wasn't hostility, it was history. Why did you tell him about the letter, she asked? Because it was the truth. Amber swirled her glass. He hates the truth. It ruins his narratives. I watched her closely. There was something else behind her silence, something quivering at the edge. She downed the last of her wine and set the glass down harder than necessary. There's a backup copy, she said suddenly, of the amendment. Ryan. He paid someone to hide it. He didn't destroy it, just locked it away. I went still. Where I can get it. I blinked. Amber, why are you helping me? Her voice dropped to a whisper. Because I'm pregnant. And I don't want my child raised in that kind of lie. If there's one thing Ryan fears more than losing money, It's losing control. Amber didn't speak on the drive. Her hands were tight on the steering wheel, jaw set with the quiet resolve of someone who'd made peace with betrayal, not mine, but her own. I didn't push. The weight of secrets sat between us, and I knew better than to disturb what had just barely decided to unearth itself. The storage facility sat on the far edge of town where streetlights turned into overgrown lots, and the pavement cracked under years of neglect. Rows of corrugated metal units lined the gravel drive like tombstones, each one padlocked, silent, forgotten. Amber pulled into the rear row, killed the engine, and exhaled. Unit B-17, she said more to herself than to me. We stepped out into the thick Virginia air, humid and tinged with rain that hadn't fallen yet. The facility office was a converted trailer, its door hanging slightly off the hinge. Inside, a bored-looking clerk blinked at us. "I need access to a unit," Amber said, sliding over a worn keycard and ID. "It's under Carter Holdings, LLC?" He squinted at the screen. "Expired company. You the leaseholder, authorized user." He shrugged. "Be my guest." No questions, no suspicion. Ryan had probably counted on that too: low visibility, low oversight. Unit B-17's lock clicked with a sharp metallic clunk. Amber rolled up the door and the smell hit us immediately: cardboard dust, old plastic, faded labels on storage bins. A fan somewhere groaned to life as the overhead fluorescent lights blinked on one by one. Boxes, dozens of them. Labeled in Ryan's handwriting. Amber walked straight to the third row, third box down. This one. Inside, manila folders stamped legal correspondence, and in the corner, 2 flash drives in heat-sealed envelopes. One read, "Will Draft V2." Signed. I stared at it for a moment, heart hammering so loud I almost didn't hear the fan shut off. Amber tore the envelope carefully, just enough to slide the drive into her palm. "Leave the rest," I said. "No evidence we were here." We repacked the box exactly as it had been. I ran my finger across the edge to match the dust line. But as we turned to leave, I felt it. A sliver of light. Not from the fluorescence. Not from outside. I looked up and froze. A tiny red dot blinked from the corner ceiling panel. Surveillance. I tapped Amber's arm. She followed my gaze. Her eyes widened, then quickly masked it. "Walk," I whispered. "Slowly. Don't look back." We rolled the unit shut and locked it. The walk back to the car felt like hours compressed into minutes. The silence between us had shifted, now taut, with the electric dread of being watched. Neither of us spoke until we hit the freeway again, headlights slicing through dusk like truth through pretense. "I didn't know," Amber murmured finally. "About the camera." "He did," I said. "He wanted to catch us in the act." Back at my apartment, I plugged in the flash drive but didn't open it yet. The weight of it pressed like a stone in my hand. Instead, I made tea. I locked every door twice. I moved my grandfather's letter to a fireproof box. I checked my phone. Nothing. At 2:47 a.m., the screen lit up. Unknown number. One message. A photo. Me standing inside Unit B-17, time-stamped 6:12 p.m. The second message followed 5 seconds later. "You made your move. Mine's next. The only thing more dangerous than losing power is realizing someone else has it." I jolted awake to darkness, but it wasn't a nightmare that pulled me from sleep. It was silence. The hum of my laptop, the low buzz of the fan, even the usual hiss of the pipes in my building, all gone. I sat up and reached for the edge of my desk, flicking on the screen. Nothing. Just a blinking cursor. Then a line of text crawled across: "System reset, external access override." My hands froze. I yanked the power and tried again. Same result. Everything: case files, digital memos, scanned documents, even my encrypted notes gone. The next 20 minutes blurred. I threw on jeans, shoved my hair into a knot, and drove through the empty streets of Charlottesville like the night itself was chasing me. By the time I reached Tara's office, dawn was barely a whisper. The door was already ajar. Tara stood in the middle of the room, a mug clutched in both hands like a weapon against the chaos. Behind her, their server unit blinked erratically. A young man with a clipboard and messy hair sat on the floor beside it, fingers flying across a detached keyboard. "It's not just you," Tara said before I opened my mouth. The server was hit sometime between midnight and 3 a.m. Sophisticated masked IP. We didn't even get an alert. I stepped closer to her desk. "Is it recoverable?" The tech didn't look up. Maybe. Eventually. But they knew what they were targeting. This wasn't random. Of course not. Tara's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, then held it out to me, her face grim. "It's for you." Voicemail. I pressed play. Ryan's voice slid through the speaker, cool and careful, like he was speaking to an audience of one me. "Now you know how fragile your world is. Walk away, Em." Click. No threat. Just certainty. As if this was his arena and I had trespassed. I didn't speak. I just nodded once and walked into the smaller conference room. I closed the door behind me and pulled out my own phone. Nora answered on the second ring. "I need a favor," I said, voice raw. "The memo. The backup. Do you still know where it is?" A pause. Then, "Yes, I can get it. But it'll take time. The source is sensitive." I hesitated. "Nora, he's watching." "Everyone, I know," she whispered. "That's why I'll move carefully." I hung up and stared at my reflection in the glass wall. Tired eyes, split ends, cracks everywhere, but not broken. Not yet. At 11:20 a.m., Tara's assistant knocked gently and handed her a brown padded envelope. "There's no return address," she said, then left. Tara opened it with surgical precision, careful not to tear what was inside. Her fingers hesitated around the corner of the document before sliding it free. Her lips parted slightly. She held it up for me. A medical report. Header, Charlottesville Psychiatric Institute. Date August 2018. Subject Emily Carter. Diagnosis borderline personality disorder. Impulse control concerns. Recommendation monitoring and potential inpatient review. It was crisp, clean, stamped, forged. But if you didn't know me, it would look real enough to plant doubt in a judge's mind, a colleague's trust, the public's gaze. Tara set it down slowly. "He's trying to preemptively discredit you. Classic deflection strategy. Dirty but effective." The edges of the document curled under my hands. "He wants me to look unstable. He wants you alone." Tara's voice was colder than I'd ever heard it. "But we're not going to let that happen." Outside the window, clouds gathered. A low rumble echoed in the distant storm coming. She turned to her desk, opened a drawer, and pulled out a yellow legal pad. "All right," she said, her voice sharp and steady. "Time to draft our counter-narrative. He wants to bury me in fiction. I'll bury him, in fact." The morning sun filtered through the arched windows of the public library, slicing across rows of dust-scented law books like a divine cross-examination. I sat beneath one of the skylight's fingers, moving methodically across my laptop keyboard, heart steady, despite everything Ryan had tried to destroy. Opposite me, Tara flipped through legal statutes with surgical precision, her eyes scanning faster than my pulse. We were silent, focused. Each click of the mouse, each page turned, was another nail in the coffin of their illusion. Beside me was a folder, thick, dog-eared, filled with every last piece we'd assembled: Harold's notarized statement, Nora's records, Amber's envelope, and, now, timestamps. Digital fingerprints that couldn't be rewritten. "Okay," I said, finally breaking the silence. "Look at this." I turned the screen toward Tara. Harold had signed the witness statement on September 3rd. The document's metadata confirmed it, but that same week in his sworn affidavit to the court, he'd claimed he was overseas attending a legal symposium in London. The discrepancy alone wouldn't hold, but paired with what Nora just sent. Tara opened her inbox and clicked on Nora's latest email, attached a PDF of Harold's original flight booking, and a second attachment cancellation confirmation dated September 1st. He never left the country, I whispered. Tara leaned back in her chair, eyes narrowed. Which means he was in Virginia. And if he was here, he was in court, signing that amendment. Which means he's been lying to cover for Ryan. Tara's lips curled into a grim smile. Perjury, obstruction, maybe even conspiracy to commit fraud. We have enough. I looked at her. Are you ready to file it? I already did, she replied, standing. Emergency motion. We'll see Judge Morton in 2 hours. By noon, we sat in the paneled waiting room outside the judge's private chambers, cool marble, underfoot brass fixtures, gleaming justice cloaked in old architecture. I kept my hands clasped in my lap, but my nerves buzzed like electric wire. A bailiff opened the door. Judge Morton will see you now. Inside, the air shifted. He sat behind a wide oak desk, no robe sleeves, rolled reading glasses perched low on his nose. Tara handed him the file, speaking only when prompted. I watched his eyes move across the pages, slow at first, then faster. His mouth drew a tight line when he reached Nora's email. 5 minutes passed in silence. Then Judge Morton set down the final page, folded his hands, and said almost to himself, This could reverse everything. He didn't say it to us. He said it to the law itself. We left without celebration. Tara wanted to stay and coordinate with the clerk's office. I needed air movement, anything to shake off the weight clinging to my ribs. The courthouse steps were long, each one a count in my pulse. Outside, autumn had begun to claim the city. The wind tasted like cold iron. I crossed the parking lot, head down, keys ready, eyes scanning out of habit Ms. Carter. I froze. Harold stood beside my car. He wasn't smiling. His suit looked more expensive than I remembered, tailored to intimidate. He held nothing, just a stillness that made my stomach coil. You don't know who you're playing with, Ms. Carter, he said, and you've just made your final move. Some truths break silence. Some shatter bloodlines. I sat still, hands folded on the cool oak table, the courtroom humming with a nervous energy I could feel beneath my skin. Judge Morton entered with a grave nod, robe trailing like storm clouds. Behind me, the gallery whispered relatives, strangers, 2 local reporters. Amber sat near the back, eyes fixed forward, her presence quieter than I expected, but more potent than I'd hoped. Tara leaned in. We go in hard. No dramatics. Just evidence. I nodded once. My throat was tight, but my pulse steady. Across the aisle, Ryan adjusted his tie with theatrical confidence. Harold sat beside him, silent, composed. But something in his jaw betrayed tension. He didn't meet my eyes. He didn't need to. We both knew this was the beginning of the unraveling. Judge Morton called the hearing to order. Petitioner Emily Carter requests a formal review of the will of the late Charles Carter, citing potential suppression of a legal amendment. Ms. Lynn, proceed. Tara rose, calm and lethal. Your Honor, we submit certified evidence. A notarized declaration from Harold Ford, voice recordings, metadata on file drafts and records showing Mr. Ford was present at the time of the alleged signing, contradicting his previous travel statement. We request full reopening of probate and appointment of an independent legal review. A murmur rippled through the room. Ryan leaned back, whispering something to Harold. I didn't blink. Judge Morton scanned the packet. Acknowledged. Mr. Carter Ryan stood slowly, that rehearsed sympathy painting his face. Your Honor, I find it unfortunate we're here today. My sister, estranged for over a decade, has now returned under questionable emotional circumstances. I submit a psychiatric evaluation from Dr. Holstein, dated 5 years ago, noting unstable behavior and an obsessive tendency toward perceived injustice. Tara shot me a quick glance, steady. The judge raised an eyebrow. Ms. Carter, would you like to respond? I rose. My voice didn't waver. Your Honor, my grandfather left me a letter. I didn't open it until recently. May I read it aloud? Permission granted. I unfolded the yellowed envelope, smoothing its creases like something sacred. You were always the one who saw truth over inheritance. When the time comes, speak for me. Silence followed. Even Ryan stopped smiling. Then from the back of the gallery a chair scraped. Amber stood. I'd like to speak. Gasps. A flash went off press camera. Judge Morton blinked in surprise. And you are? Amber Lyons, Ryan Carter's fiancée. I have information that may corroborate the petitioner's claims. I'm prepared to testify. Ryan spun around. Amber, sit down. She didn't. I can't. The room cracked open. Court stenographers clicked faster. One of the reporters leaned in like a dog catching a scent. Even Harold shifted slightly in his seat. Judge Morton tapped his gavel once. We'll recess for 15. Ms. Lyons, you'll remain in chambers for vetting. Amber's eyes flicked to me as she stepped forward. No words passed. She didn't need them. When the room emptied, I followed Tara through the side exit, but a woman with a press badge slipped beside me, breath tight and urgent. Off record, are you filing criminal charges next? I didn't answer. Not with words. But the fire building inside me was a promise. They wrote me out of the will. I'm writing them into history. The conference room inside the courthouse was colder than it needed to be. A half-dozen chairs faced a screen cord snaking across the table, binders open like exposed nerves. Tara stood at the head laptop connected to the monitor. Judge Morton leaned against a corner of the wall, arms crossed, his usual gavel replaced by a mug of lukewarm coffee. Ryan slouched with professional disdain, Harold beside him blinking too often. Amber appeared via secure video link, her face pale but composed. Behind her, the edge of a hospital consultation room hinted at morning sickness or something more, internal guilt maybe. Or conscience. This session is off record, Judge Morton stated, though his tone suggested otherwise. Ms. Lynn, begin. Tara clicked play. The footage was grainy, time-stamped 9 months ago. A hallway overhead angle. Harold walked into a document archive facility escorted by a man in a Carter Foundation polo shirt, Ryan's assistant, Miles. No authorization, no clerk visible, just a private pass card swipe and a door swinging open. 5 minutes later, they exited with a briefcase. Ryan shifted. This proves nothing. Tara didn't blink. Then let's try audio. She played Amber's recording. Ryan's voice came through unmistakable. Burn everything from before 2022, I don't care what it is. We keep what we need, nothing more. The rest, fireproof it. Then fire it. Amber flinched on screen. You said the amendment didn't matter. And now you see why it did. Silence gripped the room like a vacuum. Officer Dougherty, a broad-shouldered man with a civil inspector's badge clipped to his belt, closed his notebook. Based on this, Judge, we've opened an inquiry into possible document tampering and fraudulent suppression of estate records. If we find more, this leaves the civil domain and moves into criminal fraud. Ryan's knuckles whitened on the table edge. I want that audio authenticated. You have no chain of custody. Amber stared directly at the camera. I recorded it. In our home. On my phone. I'll hand over the original. The judge leaned forward. Mr. Carter, Mr. Ford, until further notice, the execution of the contested will is suspended. Full probate is reopened. Ms. Carter's claim proceeds under review. Officer, you'll coordinate with my clerk for document holds. Harold inhaled sharply, then reached for his briefcase, but Dougherty's voice cut him off. Leave it. The room emptied slowly. I stayed until the cords were disconnected, until Amber's image flickered to black. Only then did I move Tara beside me. We exited through the east side of the building, the afternoon sun too bright to feel victorious. My phone buzzed. Unknown number? Realtor. Ms. Carter, sorry to disturb. This is regarding 14 Belford Road, the property listed under Charles Carter's trust. I'm obligated to inform you it's scheduled for auction this Saturday. I stopped cold. Auction? That house isn't even... It was used as collateral for a private loan taken out 2 months ago, signed by Harold Ford as trustee. No payments have been made. I barely heard Tara ask what was wrong. My grandfather's home, the one place untouched by their rot, was on the chopping block. And Harold had done it quietly, efficiently, like everything else. They had tried to burn the truth. Now they were burning the past itself. They tried to sell my inheritance behind my back. Now I'm selling their lies in front of a judge. The sky was slate gray when we stepped onto the courthouse steps, but the air crackled like a storm was coming. Not weather truth. Dozens of reporters lined up cords trailing to vans. Microphones, angled lenses already focused. Tara had warned me once we stepped into this there was no turning back. I didn't want to. She adjusted the podium. Mike nodded at me once. Behind her stood Amber, arms crossed chin high despite the swarm of attention. The only person visibly more nervous than Amber was me, but I didn't show it. Not today. Tara raised her voice over the rustle of press badges. We'd like to make a formal statement regarding the Carter probate dispute and submit evidence to both the court of law and the court of public opinion. A sea of flashes. I stepped forward and opened the folder in my hand. My name is Emily Carter. 2 weeks ago, I returned to my family for a will reading. I was told my grandfather left me nothing. I accepted it until I discovered that wasn't the truth. I held up the notarized documents, the still frames from surveillance footage, printed excerpts of Ryan's audio. My grandfather's will was altered, suppressed, and replaced through a coordinated effort, one that included illegal document tampering, abuse of fiduciary power, and strategic erasure. Gasps, cameras clicking like a drumline. I'm not fighting for money, I said, letting my voice harden. I'm fighting for the truth he tried to preserve and others tried to bury. Then Amber stepped beside me. Her voice trembled at first but steadied. My name is Amber Lyons. I was Ryan Carter's fiancée. I discovered I'm carrying his child. Murmurs. A few shouted questions. I'm here because I will not raise this child in a lie. I have submitted a verified DNA test and audio evidence of Ryan's admission to destroying documents. I am prepared to testify under oath. Flashes burst like gunfire. Tara stepped back in. We have also filed formal criminal complaints with the Commonwealth Attorney's Office. 3 counts: abuse of power of attorney, destruction of legal instruments, and will falsification. The evidence is now in the hands of investigators. One of the reporters shouted, "Is Harold Ford named in the complaint?" Tara didn't blink. Yes. The courtyard broke into chaos. Questions flew from every direction, none of them subtle. Do you believe the inheritance fraud was planned years ago? Is Ryan Carter under investigation by federal agencies? Did Mr. Carter's grandfather anticipate any of this? We didn't answer. The media had its fuel now, and the fire was spreading. That afternoon, headlines flooded the local networks and crawled across national news tickers. My phone buzzed constantly, calls, alerts, tags. I ignored them all. Except one. At 4:12 p.m., a secure email appeared from my financial attorney. Subject: urgent. Discovery body Emily. I found something. A dormant trust account opened in your name in 2020, seeded with assets traced to Charles Carter's estate. Hidden under a layered holding but legally yours. It appears your grandfather prepared for this eventuality. Justice doesn't erase pain, but it rewrites legacy. The courthouse was silent. Not the kind of silence born from reverence, but the brittle waiting kind. As though even the air was holding its breath. I stood beside Tara, her briefcase shut tight, her posture straighter than I'd ever seen. Judge Morton leaned forward, reading aloud from the final ruling. In light of the presented evidence, The court hereby voids the probate execution of the contested will, dated May 2023. Not a sound in the room. In accordance with substantiated claims of document suppression, forgery, and misconduct by legal proxies, the court reinstates the 2020 amendment declaring Emily Carter the rightful heir to the Charles H. Carter estate. No one clapped. No one dared. At the defense table, Harold's hands trembled as he adjusted his glasses. Ryan sat frozen, face pale beneath the courtroom lights. Earlier, they'd tried to turn on each other. Harold had called Ryan reckless. Ryan, in turn, accused Harold of masterminding the cover-up. Their attorneys requested withdrawal mid-session, citing conflicts of interest. The judge denied it. Let them squirm together. Tara didn't smile. Neither did I. This wasn't a victory to gloat over. It was a wound cauterized, not healed. I raised my hand, swore to accept the ruling without appeal, and stated that I would fully comply with any forthcoming investigations. When Judge Morton declared that the case would be forwarded for criminal prosecution, the room stirred, but I stayed still, calm. Not because it didn't matter, but because it mattered too much to break composure. When the gavel fell, it echoed through me. 11 years of silence, disdain, disinheritance. And now, finally, my name returned to its rightful place, not just in paperwork, but in truth. Outside, cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. Tara shielded me with her arm and guided me down the marble steps without a word. Amber stood across the plaza, one hand resting on her stomach, the other wrapped around a thermos. We didn't speak, but she nodded. I nodded back. The sun had begun to set by the time I reached the old house. The place hadn't changed much. Faded white shutters, cracked porch swing, and the faint smell of pine and old books. A few vines had grown wild around the entry columns. The door, oddly, was ajar. Cautiously, I stepped inside. Dust floated in golden shafts of light from the hallway window. The rooms were still. The kind of stillness that doesn't feel threatening but heavy like memory. I made my way toward the kitchen, then stopped. On the dining table, his old mahogany table, lay a single envelope. No stamp. No address. Just my name written in the careful, blocky handwriting I'd memorized as a child. It was dated June 2020. They gave me nothing. He gave me everything. I stood in the center of the room, where my grandfather once read the morning paper, where the ticking of the wall clock used to echo against porcelain cups and the faint scent of cedar. Sunlight spilled through the east-facing windows, warm and soft, casting long shadows over the wooden floor. The letter in my hand felt heavier than it should have. I unfolded it slowly. Emily, it began in his familiar, deliberate script. If you're reading this, the people I feared have already tried and perhaps succeeded to alter the course of what I left behind. I knew they would. That's why I didn't trust the ink alone. He had transferred the bulk of his estate, real asset stocks, and even a small overseas account into a private trust under my name, one that bypassed probate entirely. It wasn't in the will. It wasn't even mentioned in his recorded estate file. It's not inheritance, he wrote. It's justice delayed. I sat back in the old dining chair, the legs creaking faintly beneath me. My chest tightened, not with grief this time, but with something softer. Gratitude, maybe, or quiet vindication. He continued, "They will say you were disloyal, that you left. But I know why you did. You saw rot where others painted gold leaf. That's why I trusted you and no one else." Outside, morning birds chirped low in the trees. I heard the hum of a delivery truck turning onto the main road and a dog barking faintly 3 houses down. Normal life, resuming. And somehow, I was part of it again. I texted Amber just 2 words. "It's done." Her reply came instantly. "So proud of you. Baby and I are safe. Visit soon." I smiled. Then Tara called. "The fund transfer cleared." "The assets are yours," she said. "But what are you going to do with them?" I glanced around the house, his house now mine. Not a mausoleum, not a battlefield. Just a space waiting to breathe again. I'm setting up a foundation, I said. A legal aid trust. For people who've been erased like I almost was. There was a pause, and then Tara said, "That's exactly what he would have wanted." I left the phone on the kitchen counter and wandered into the front yard, letting the sunlight warm my face. The mailbox still bore his initials, CHC. I'd keep it that way. The guilt, the bitterness, they didn't vanish. But something had shifted. For the first time in over a decade, I wasn't running from this place. I was rooted here again on my own terms. Clarity doesn't always come with thunderclaps or verdicts. Sometimes it arrives on paper aged with time and handwriting that outlives the hand that held the pen. I walked toward the gate, brushing my fingers over the iron bars. And that's when I saw him. A man, mid-40s, maybe older, stood beside a silver sedan holding something in his hand. A worn photograph. He looked at me like someone trying to match memory to reality. "Excuse me," he said, voice uncertain. "I'm sorry to come unannounced. My name's Alan. I think I'm Charles Carter's son. From another relationship. Which would make us—" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. Heirs by blood may inherit a name, but only those who fight for truth inherit the legacy. After years of silence, betrayal, and carefully buried lies, justice didn't just knock, it roared through the courtroom like a long overdue storm. When injustice is met with unwavering courage, the final verdict can echo through a lifetime. No wall of lies can stand forever against the tide of truth. Perhaps standing up today means you'll never again have to bow to injustice tomorrow. If this story struck a chord with you, share and leave a comment. Comment 1 if you felt seen. Comment 2 if you think justice could have gone even further.